we can find the companies liable and simply say, here's how much you owe us, pay us. That seems to me not only a safer way, not only a less expensive way, but it seems to me a much more financially secure way of going about enriching the public purse in Nova Scotia and offsetting the undoubtedly very large amounts of money that we've had to pay out unnecessarily over the years due to the malfeasance of those companies. So, as I said, Mr. Speaker, I'm going to vote in favor of this legislation, but I'm going to vote in favor of it reluctantly because I would have thought that surely there is a much more effective alternative that can be thought of by the government, and I invite them to turn their minds to this. I hope it is the case that we can find a better way of going about this. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to this bill.
Recognize the honourable member for Dartmouth East.
Oh, sorry. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I have to admit that originally this afternoon I was not going to speak on this Bill 222, but after listening to other members here in the House, I feel I can't, in good conscience, not say what I truly am feeling sitting here. I can't in good conscience not make comments on this topic, Mr. Speaker, because we all know somebody, and we've heard personal stories here today, somebody that has died or has been affected by smoking, either themselves or secondhand smoke. Or in the future, we will know people that will pass on due to this, Mr. Speaker. And I do feel that listening here this evening, I've heard a lot of, I suppose, not debate, but more, again, stories on why we all know cigarette smoking is not something we should be doing, yet a lot of us seem to still be continuing in that practice. And my biggest concern, I guess, Mr. Speaker, is that even though we were taught in school and we were taught by our parents that this was something we shouldn't be doing, many of our friends took it up, and Mr. Speaker, even today as we stand here, some of the members in this House have children that are smoking now or will be smoking in the future, whether they're teenagers, preteens, or adults. And unfortunately, the trends in this province and, of course, right across North America are that people aren't stopping this habit. And in fact, that there is a whole industry now built around trying to help people stop this, such as the patch and the gum and whatever. And although we seem to have thought that we have ended the advertising in the sale of cigarettes, it hasn't, because if you go to any movie theater or rent a DVD at home, you will see some of the biggest stars today smoking on the screen. So it is still there, it is prevalent. People have a hard time quitting. There is still cigarettes being sold to minors in Nova Scotia. We are going to see legislation come through the House to stop the smoking in public restaurants and facilities. Unfortunately, people will still be able to smoke at home, and they will still smoke at home with children in the same room, in their cars with children in the cars. So one of the previous speakers spoke about how much would these companies actually owe us, and how would we possibly ever get them to pay up? Because they have a whole new generation of people coming online with money, with disposable income, that are going to take up this habit. And I don't know if, when you talk to people, anybody really knows what the true cost of this is to the healthcare system. And what people ask me, and what I ask myself, and what I do not know the answer to, is what actually is the healthcare cost versus the income that this province actually takes in through sales, through the tax on cigarettes. And if we all know that cigarettes kill either firsthand or secondhand, how can we stand here and not feel hypocritical when we're still going to allow the sale of this product in our province, and in fact in Canada or anywhere else in the world? So I have to say, you know, I honestly do feel hypocritical standing here, even though I support the bill going through, because there's a lot of things in life, if you just stand and do nothing, nothing will happen. It's something, but I will repeat, I do feel hypocritical. I have to say I feel hypocritical because we're still going to allow the sale of this product in our province, and so I guess I'm going to support it. Going to law amendments, we'll see what people have to say about it, and I will end there, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Thank you. Recognize the honourable member for Cape Breton Lakes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm pleased to rise and speak a few moments on Bill 222. And being from Victoria, the Lakes, Mr. Speaker, in a rural area, I see all too well the youth of the area engaging in smoking. I attended a funeral for a young 21-year-old member from my community this afternoon, and couldn't help but notice afterwards that all these young, handsome young men and all these beautiful young ladies, everybody with a cigarette in their hand and smoking away to beat the band. And I was thinking about this bill, which is an act to recover the damages and health care costs from manufacturers of tobacco. Mr. Speaker, if you stop to think, recovering damages, if I go ahead and I damage something and I automatically create costs, then I'm held accountable and I must pay either a fine or be incarcerated in jail. Yet we have these companies selling supposedly tobacco. What about the numerous additives, Mr. Speaker, that go along to create the addiction? It's enabling legislation at best. It sets the stage for Nova Scotia to take legal action, costly legal action, long-term action that doesn't produce a definite result. Mr. Speaker, I'm not a lawyer like the Honourable NDP member from Halifax-Shabukto. When he spoke, and he being a lawyer, I decided I would choose a more honourable profession and become a politician. Having said that, Mr. Speaker, I have to compliment the member from Halifax-Shabukto on his enlightened information on the courts and court costs and the problem of collecting money, if any. Mr. Speaker, the press release said yesterday that it's all about holding the industry accountable for the sums of taxpayers' dollars spent to fight lung cancer and related illnesses. Mr. Speaker, I wonder, what about government accountability? Is the government going to spend all the money on the tobacco taxes that they collect on cancer and related illnesses? I understand that last year the province collected $178 million in tobacco taxes, yet there's items in that control strategy that aren't even being touched. The government hasn't evaluated the strategy in regards to components that are working and not working. When you do something, you should know where you're going and how you're going to get there and what's the best route to follow. And that's when you evaluate something, Mr. Speaker. This is a policy or a problem or probably a scourge on society that just didn't happen and come on to today's agenda. It's something that's been coming for a long time. We've been experiencing it. We know that health costs are going through the roof, and that smoking is one of the major costs in the healthcare system. And yet, we wait until a proactive province like British Columbia, they take the lead, and this province follows. Smoking is a crisis. It reverts me right back to this government managing from crisis to crisis, or I should say mismanagement from crisis to crisis. We have district health authorities and other agencies who create non-smoking programs to try and help people break the habit, only to have 2 or 3 months success, 4 or 5 months success, and then run out of funds to keep the program alive and well. And with that, a lot of those people who were gaining a foothold against the addiction slide back into it again. I talk to them on a daily basis when in each and every community, and they'll tell me, Gerald, I actually gave it up for 6 months, 9 months. I almost got a year in, and guess what? I'm back at smoking again. Mr. Speaker, this $178 million, I would really like to see it go toward illnesses created by tobacco. The minister says he's going to hold the tobacco companies accountable for their actions. And I already mentioned what about the government's accountability. But, Mr. Speaker, I wonder, isn't there an accountability on the part of the smoker? What about their accountability? But then we get into what our learned lawyer friend was saying. Is it a voluntary action or an involuntary action? Once you're hooked, once you're committed to smoking, once you're addicted, do you smoke because you want to smoke, or do you smoke because you have to? And as I said, I'm not a lawyer, but somebody in that learned profession would argue that it was an involuntary act because he was addicted. Therefore, it's not his fault, so you can't hold him or her accountable. Another trip to the court, another time wasted, and money made for the learned profession and the courts, but nothing for the victim in this case. And, Mr. Speaker, you've heard me mention about the additives. I go back to, if I create damages and costs, then I pay a penalty. If I use certain tools, if I commit a crime and I wear a mask, I use a weapon, then these are additives. These are things that I'm adding to the crime. These companies are putting in chemicals beyond which some of us can't even comprehend. Is it tobacco that these people are smoking? Or is it drugs with some tobacco mixed? And as I hear some of our learned colleagues on the other side say that, talking about rolling their own, Mr. Speaker, there's some of us who didn't have that experience. When our approach, Mr. Speaker, when is our approach going to change and become proactive and focus on the youth before they begin to smoke? That's being proactive. Don't wait till, there again, what this government is doing is going from crisis to crisis. Be reactive. Wait till they begin to smoke, wait till they become addicted, and then see what you can do about it. And, Mr. Speaker, that's always putting the cart before the horse. I think of last Christmas going down to an elementary school Christmas program that all the little kids were all tingling with a Christmas excitement and getting up on stage and singing their songs to do their Christmas concert. I was in the parking lot at the school, car pulled in, 3 adults in the car, and 3 children. All the windows rolled up because it's December, cold. All 3 adults smoking like chimneys with the 3 children in the car. They opened the doors and you swear the vehicle was on fire inside. The air was just blue when it was open. Absolutely disgusting, Mr. Speaker. So I don't know what we're going to have to do, but I think the only time that I find you get results in most cases is when you hit people in the pocketbook. And as somebody who does not smoke, lives an active lifestyle, and is a very low cost on the healthcare system, they receive the same treatment as somebody who is lethargic, obese, excessive smoker, and is basically a terminal cost on the healthcare system. Both get the same type of treatment when they go to the hospital, but the person who is there very, very minimal is paying a larger shot for the person who is abusing the system. And maybe there should be some kind of a surcharge if you're a smoker, that whereas healthcare pays 100% of the cost for the person who is active and only attains medical attention when it's necessary, as compared to somebody who is continually there and continues to abuse themselves and cost the healthcare system money. That's just a thought that, as I said, Mr. Speaker, a lot of times when you hit somebody in the pocketbook, that's the only time that it hits home. But, Mr. Speaker, I would like to see the Minister inform Nova Scotians of how they plan to spend the proceeds from the tobacco tax that they receive. Because we literally hear stories of people who have cancer and lung-related illnesses who spend their life savings to try and attain good health. Those people, Mr. Speaker, should be looked after, and there seems to be a lot of funds there that could help them along with that $178 million just in last year collected. Tell Nova Scotians, Mr. Speaker, how this government would spend the money, instead of just grabbing it and putting it into general revenue, the black hole of general revenues. Gas tax, tobacco tax, fuel oil tax, and every other kind of tax, just drop it into the one pot. When you try to disseminate how much was collected from which, it's pretty hard to discern one from the other. So, Mr. Speaker, I look forward to the bill going to law amendments and to see what the general public and all those involved would have to say. And when this government informs all of Nova Scotians how they plan to be accountable to them with the revenue that's generated as a result of this bill. Mr. Speaker, I'll be voting for this bill to pass it through to law amendments and hopefully await a very positive result. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Honourable Member. I'll recognize the Honourable Member from Clare.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to rise and say a few words on Bill number 222, an act to recover damages and healthcare costs from manufacturers of tobacco. Mr. Speaker, as the Minister said in his opening comments on this bill is all about holding the tobacco industry accountable. Mr. Speaker, everyone recognizes that our governments throughout Canada are spending millions and millions of dollars every year to treat people suffering from lung cancer and related illnesses. I'm sure, Speaker, if we only knew just how much governments are spending to help and treat people across Canada for smoking-related illnesses, I'm sure it would be a huge sum of money. Mr. Speaker, everyone knows of someone losing their life to lung cancer or related illnesses every year in Nova Scotia. And that trend continues every year as well. My family, like many other families throughout Nova Scotia, have lost loved ones due to smoking. Mr. Speaker, everyone knows that smoking is not good for your health. And I'm not here tonight to lecture you on the risk of smoking. However, Mr. Speaker, the time is right. The time is right for governments, and our government here in Nova Scotia as well, to hold the tobacco industry accountable. As it was stated, this piece of legislation is similar to one that's been introduced in British Columbia. This legislation in Nova Scotia is a beginning. There's a long haul, Mr. Speaker. Our caucus is in support of this bill to go forward to law amendments. Mr. Speaker, I'm sure this bill will have very few people coming forward at law amendments to speak against this bill. There could be lots of people coming forward to speak in favor of this bill. Having said that, Mr. Speaker, I'm sure this bill will eventually go through law amendments and committee of the House, and then third and final reading. Once this bill is finally passed by this legislature, this bill will set the stage for Nova Scotia to take legal action against the tobacco industry to recover healthcare costs associated with tobacco-related illnesses. And Mr. Speaker, in closing, I don't have a legal background, but I hope when the minister closes on this bill, I'm wondering, and I'm sure many people are wondering, what's going to happen next once this bill passes third and final reading? It sets the stage, for the government to take legal actions against tobacco companies. As the minister indicated in his opening comments on this bill, and I quote, "The government will be doing research towards advancing our case in the courts." So, Mr. Speaker, maybe when the minister wraps up, he could inform the House on when the government is looking at advancing our case in the courts. I'm sure there's already been research done over this. I'm sure the Department of Health has some hard numbers of the actual cost that every year taxpayers' dollars in Nova Scotia are being spent to help treat smoking-related illnesses. And I'm sure not just myself, Mr. Speaker, I'm sure many of my colleagues are also wondering when is the government looking at advancing our case forward in the courts. And I'm sure lots of people, lots of Nova Scotians, I'm sure will be following this. I'm sure it's going to be a long process. I'm not that naive, thinking that it's going to be, an easy court challenge. I'm sure the tobacco companies will be debating this in many courts throughout Canada. Finally, Mr. Speaker, I'm sure, as I've said, this is going to be a long battle in the courts, and I wish the minister, I wish the government all the best as they move forward. This is a small step, but it definitely is the right step to take. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I will take my seat. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honourable Member. We'll recognize the Government House Leader to close debate.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yes, on behalf of the Minister of Justice, I'd move second reading of Bill 222. And, Mr. Speaker, I can assure the honourable members opposite who have debated this bill that when the bill returns to this chamber for Committee of the Whole House, that the Honourable Minister will be pleased to answer whatever questions that they have. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Recognize the Honourable Leader, House Leader of the Government. Okay, we'll call the question on second reading. All those in favour signify by saying aye. Aye. Those against say nay.
Is the motion carried?
Motion is carried.
Bill number 222, entitled An Act to Recover Damages and Healthcare Costs from Manufacturers of Tobacco.
We'll now move that this be referred to the Law Amendments Committee. Recognize the Government House Leader.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, would you please call Bill number 225, the Smoke-Free Places Act?
Bill 225, the Smoke-Free Places Act, and we'll recognize the Minister of Health Promotion.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I will keep my my words brief in light of the time this evening, and to ensure that there's opportunity on the other side to debate the issue. But, Mr. Speaker, in my short words, I will say just to say how pleased I am that we have moved forward with this legislation. I think this is certainly the right move that we have made a decision upon, and I certainly believe that the bill put forward is one of significance. I'm sure that all sides of the House will agree that it was not a matter of if Nova Scotia would be going 100% smoke-free, but when. And I am very pleased that we have decided that the when is now. The fact, Mr. Speaker, that we have still many places in our province where you can still smoke in smoking ventilated rooms was perhaps a decision that we made a few years ago, which was perhaps the right decision for the time. But certainly we need to make the changes necessary that need to be made to move forward. If you take a look back in 2001, when the tobacco strategy was put forward, it's safe to say that the Minister of Health at the time, my colleague, the now Minister of Education, put forward a strategy which is already making a difference in the lives of Nova Scotians. Over 78,000 Nova Scotians have quit the habit of using tobacco since that time, going from 30% of Nova Scotians to 20%. This legislation that is put forward is legislation which is needed to continue taking that number in a downward spiral. It's needed because it's going to get at the very heart of some of the challenges that we are still facing. Some of the challenges that we are facing in that 20 to 30-year-old age range when they're out at a bar in the evening, when they're out on a patio at a bar, which is included, I might add, Mr. Speaker, in the legislation. These types of steps are needed if we are going to get at the heart of the matter to have a healthier province in order to deal with some of those costs referred to during the previous speakers. And Mr. Speaker, if you take a look at the legislation, and I know that we'll be hearing a great deal about it, it really is a piece of legislation we'll all be able to point to at the end of the day and to say truly to Nova Scotians that we are making a difference in their daily lives. It's one of those pieces of legislation that indeed from a health perspective, Mr. Speaker, we may not see all the savings overnight, but it's over the next 15, 20, 25 years that we'll truly see the difference from getting at those younger individuals at a young age. So with that, Mr. Speaker, again, I'm keeping my words brief this evening. I look forward to the comments of those across the floor, and no doubt we'll have some comments later on.
Thank you, Mr. Minister. We'll now recognize the Honourable Member from Sackville-Cobequid.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It gives me pleasure to stand tonight, this evening, to speak a few moments on Bill number 225. I'll make a few comments and then give a few concerns that we have with this piece of legislation, or the idea of this piece of legislation coming before us now. This government has not been consistent with the message around the non-smoking places in this province, Mr. Speaker. Roughly 3 years ago, the minister did mention that they had made a decision to enforce or bring changes to the smoke-free places in Nova Scotia that required many of the businesses, the bars, and the private clubs in this province to invest a lot of money, Mr. Speaker, into putting in smoking rooms with their own ventilation system. The minister said perhaps it was the right decision at that time, which I think gives the mixed message to Nova Scotians about their commitment to smoke-free places in this province. I do commend the minister for finally coming forward, something we've been stating for many years now about 100% smoke-free environment, especially for Nova Scotians who are working in those particular businesses that tend to have had a higher number of individuals smoking in their establishments. So some of the concerns we do have is that investment that these business owners, small business owners, most of them, that are scattered throughout this province in small towns and communities that have invested their own money into abiding by government laws and bills that we pass on the floor of this legislature. And one of them was to acquire in their business these smoke-free or smoking rooms with proper ventilation. I know many of the establishments in my community understood that this was a step that they needed to take. They want to abide by the rules and regulations and the laws in this province, especially around the safety of employees and patrons to their business, and invested that money into putting these smoking rooms in place, Mr. Speaker. And, we're talking about small business entrepreneurs and owners in this province. Most of them are from the communities that they have their business in or their establishment in. They employ Nova Scotians in their business, in their establishment, and are a great revenue generator for this province when it comes to taxes, wages, and other things that they do in those establishments to raise funds for government, for one, but to also give Nova Scotians a living. These establishments, many of the bars and the private clubs in our community, play more role than most people think in the community than just being a place to go and get a drink, get a beer or a drink of wine. I know in my community, for example, I have to tell you, Mr. Speaker, that I attend a lot of functions in these establishments that raise money for nonprofit groups in the community, for health care, for physical activities, for sports teams. I'm talking about a lot of the booster nights and fundraisers and auctions that many of these organizations couldn't exist without the support of the community. And one of the places they do this in is these bars and private clubs and establishments in our communities. So these entrepreneurs and business owners, really give back a lot to the community. And they try to abide by all the rules and regulations and the bills and the laws that come through and brought down by government upon themselves in order to hopefully, have a good, profitable and safe environment and establishment in the communities throughout this province. One of the things that government should have done initially was explain to these owners and these bar entrepreneurs, owners that own these small businesses in the community, was, they had some intentions down the road to maybe changing it. But as I said, these establishments, these owners and small business owners have a small margin of profit, very small, Mr. Speaker. And there's a lot of talk around, what is involved and what kind of margin these small business owners take home at the end of the day. And, government really brings down a lot of the policies and regulations for them to follow. You just have to take, the numbers of VLTs that are in these establishments. There's a controversy over what VLTs are in our province and the number of them throughout our communities. And with the recent announcement that the numbers will go down, that's a loss of revenue for many of these business owners. This new smoke-free 100% smoke-free policy and bill number 225, will be a loss of revenue for these small business owners because of the money invested in providing these smoke rooms with ventilation. It's not a cheap venture, Mr. Speaker. These are very expensive pieces of ventilation system that these owners went out and purchased, many of them on their own. There is been some question around some of these larger industries or larger establishments having their rooms paid for, or these smoking rooms paid for by no other than the tobacco companies, Mr. Speaker. But I don't think you would see, or if you went around and asked many of the bar owners in Nova Scotia, that they're the majority of them. It's probably a very few that had the opportunity or the ability to have their renovations to their establishment paid for by the tobacco industry. Many of these individuals, many of these small business owners use their own revenue to abide by a piece of legislation that this government brought forward. And that's where the message is not consistent with what the Minister of Health Promotion stated today. They should have enacted this many years ago. So that these owners could understand that, okay, we're going to follow the rules, we're going to follow the laws of this province and abide by these smoke-free regulations that we're going to see, and now it leaves them wondering what the next step is going to be. What else is government going to do to try to put increased cost on these small business owners? They do have till December 1st, 2006. But I'm sure it's not any benefit to them since they've already incurred the cost of putting these ventilation systems in, these smoke-free or these smoking rooms in. So there's another loss for these small business owners. Many of these small business owners do want to abide by these regulations and the laws that governs the policies around this. The other concern we have with this piece of legislation is around the enforcement area. This is going to be downloaded onto our municipalities to enforce these bylaws or these smoke-free environments. And I hear on a daily basis about the HRM, the municipality here in Halifax, not able to address the bylaw issues now. And it's interesting to see, or it would be interesting to hear from the minister to see if they've talked to the municipalities around the province about enforcing this 100% smoke-free piece of legislation. And is there going to be any additional resources allocated to these municipalities so that they can do the job for our government to enforce these bylaws? And as I said in the beginning, Mr. Speaker, this is something that we as a party have endorsed for many years. And I think it's a little bit unfair for this government to decide, 3 years ago, to take some steps in improving some of the air quality in our businesses, and then, roughly 3 years later saying, well, no, we're going to go the whole way. And, those owners that expended all that money putting in these smoking rooms are just out of luck, Mr. Speaker. So with that, we do have a couple concerns about the enforcement, definitely, and what role municipalities are going to play, and potentially an added burden of cost to enforcing this piece of legislation. But I know that, the message from government needs to be consistent, especially when we're dealing with small business owners, like many of the owners of the bars and clubs around this province, Mr. Speaker. They employ Nova Scotians, and they are an important part of our community, not only because it's an area where you can go and get a beer or a drink, but they play an important role in the fundraising efforts of many of our groups and organizations in our communities. And these are Nova Scotians who own these businesses and have roots here, and they should be given full respect and the ability to perform what they want to do in a business world in this province without having to pay the penalties of governments changing their minds year after year on what the rules and policies are for these small business owners. So with that, Mr. Speaker, I do support this piece of legislation. It's been something we've been calling for many years, but you still have to be reminded that these small-time business owners are going to feel the effect of this piece of legislation.
Thank you, Honourable Member. We'll now recognize the Honourable Member from Hants East.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm not sure if I'm going to take the exact line of my colleague who just sat down.
It's a democracy.
I remember when the previous act, the act that we're amending, I remember when that came through this House, and I was here. Yes, I was here, and I remember the lobby by the Bars and Restaurant Association to that piece of legislation. And perhaps the government's response in that previous legislation may have been what they deemed to be a compromise from a variety of stakeholders coming at them. And I remember my own thoughts at that time that the government wasn't going far enough. That whether it be a future government, whether it be Liberal, New Democrat, or Conservative government, but at some point down the road, there was going to be a ban. There was going to be a ban, and you didn't have to be a rocket scientist to figure out that was coming and that the public wanted it. Now, I remember the arguments actually put forward by the Restaurant and Bar Association, and their comments were to this effect that stay out of our business. We know about running restaurants and bars. You don't, so don't interfere with what we're doing. And my thoughts at that time were that it was the medical society who was really trying to tell politicians that you got to do something about smoking in this province. And I thought that it was their role to talk about health in this province. I didn't think it was restaurateurs who were supposed to talk about health. I thought it was the medical community that should talk about health. But they took the view that, the medical community doesn't know about running restaurants, so let us do that and let's have smoking in those restaurants. And the point that I couldn't accept, or I guess the direction they took that I couldn't believe, is why they weren't the ones who were asking for the ban. I remember one presenter at Law Amendments tried to make the case that he was worried about his competitor. He wanted an equal or level playing field. And he said, I don't want to lose business from my establishment because somebody else down the street builds a better box. In other words, if they have a better non-smoking section or whatever, that they can spend $100,000 and I can only spend $30,000. I took the view that, well, if there was a complete ban, neither one of you would have to spend money. And if somebody left your establishment, it was because of your service or your product, and then they went to your competitor. I think the thing that surprises me most about today is that the government came to this point this fast. Like I think my comments would, and I applaud them. The government House leader, if he wants to stand and applaud me, yes, he could do that. I would accept it. So I have to say that I'm surprised, but I'm impressed that the government is going down this road. This is long overdue. I didn't expect to see this this soon in my career here, and which is hard to know just how long that might be, but it's refreshing. I wish the government had actually, and this is, I agree with my colleague on this, that if the government had actually indicated in 2002 that they were going to go down this road so quickly, or had gone down this road then, that actually any of those small business owners that spent money would have been able to not do that. And I think they deserve that. But for their own actions, they were not willing to even entertain this. And I think to a point, they were authors of their own misfortune, and could have really saved themselves some dollars by looking down the road, looking at the competitive environment in which they work, and I think that it would have been to their benefit to act accordingly. And maybe at some point the Minister of Health Promotion will let us know just what brought us here to this bill. And I'm not sure if I did. I guess I didn't look. Maybe. This act has effect on and after December 1st, 2006, upon the Governor and Council so ordering and declaring by proclamation. Now, this government has a somewhat dubious history of not proclaiming legislation. And I'm sure that's purely an oversight. But I have to say I'm curious as to why the government felt that they had to give this a year. The fact that they're willing to go down this road at all, I think, is important, and it's impressive. And but the message just became clouded by not willing to have this legislation come into effect till December 2006. Now, so maybe at some point the minister will clarify how we got to this point, what brought him to this point, and if he felt it important enough to bring this legislation to the House, why he didn't feel it important enough to say December 1st, 2005. And it does beg the question of what's going to happen between now and then that the government felt it necessary to inoculate themselves a little bit with this legislation. The explanatory note, which is actually is quite helpful, but I guess it does make sense. There are exceptions in this legislation, and designated smoking rooms in healthcare facilities for the acute or long-term care of veterans, in licensed nursing homes and residential care facilities, and in homes for aged and disabled persons. So I guess if we were to take the view that these people are less able to leave their facility to go outside, homes, their homes. It's regarded as their home. There's their home. I see. I'm not sure if the Minister of Tourism is trying to do his impression of the member for Colchester, Bible Hill, or Truro, the Honourable Jamie Muir. But I think I caught his message, in that these people would refer to these facilities as their homes, and as much as if somebody else was in their own home, that we wouldn't legislate that they couldn't smoke in their own home. So I'll thank the minister for that. If there was an advantage to the previous legislation. It was that it paved the road a bit to this legislation. It generated the debate that brought us here. I'd be very interested to see, when we get to law amendments, what the reaction is from the stakeholders, who may have some angst against this legislation or with this legislation. It's I don't know if members would remember. I certainly hope that those who were members in the House in 2000 and 2002 would remember Helen Crow when she came to the House of Assembly and sat in the gallery. And I think she actually spoke to law amendments, if I'm not mistaken, but I'm not sure. But anyway, for those who don't remember Helen Crow, Helen Crow was the lady who was on those smoking commercials where she indicated that she had worked in the restaurant business for 40 years, had never smoked a cigarette, and had never smoked a cigarette in her life, and was dying of lung cancer. Now, I would not expect people who are in the restaurant business to be perhaps as knowledgeable on the effects of smoke or secondhand smoke as the medical community, but this legislation, I guess, encapsulates the tone or the message from the previous legislation. I know that the issues we raised in the previous bill were around workplace safety and not just for the customers who go into these establishments or in any establishment, but for workers who might have to work under conditions where their health would be put at risk in these establishments. And even if you look at it in terms of workers' compensation legislation, then we believe that you don't put workers in harm's way. That we have labor standards that indicate that safety is an issue, and that we expect employers to follow that. I mean, if you're working on a staging on a building, then you have a safety harness to protect you. So why would we put workers in harm's way where we know we have the information that indicates that their health is going to be at risk? And would you allow anybody to put their health at risk and not have some mechanism to protect them? And although the previous bill did go some distance in that regard, this one I think goes further. I'm not so knowledgeable on other jurisdictions, what other provinces have done, and I actually in 2002 I may have brushed up a little bit on what was going on across the country, but certainly if we're not at the forefront, we can't be too far behind anybody, I would say, with legislation like this act. And I'm very pleased. I guess, as most members would know, that I was a teacher for 15 years, and I had a problem. Actually, I had a problem with smoking in schools, or actually for the staff to be smoking in the staff room in a school. And the reason I had a problem with that, because we were educators, and the information linking illness and the harm to cigarettes and cigarette smoke was well known. I mean, most people, anybody paying attention, was certainly well aware that there was a link. I think years ago it was not so well made, but certainly by recent times we were all well aware that the case had been made, that there was a direct cause and effect, and that here we were allowing educators in a place where we would educate young minds to smoke in the staff room, something we knew was detrimental to their health. So, and schools had we had a policy whereby there was actually a location where students could smoke at the senior high school level, and which seems strange because you're not able to purchase them under 18, so or 18 and under. So when I go by or attend the school that I used to teach at, which is Hants East Rural High, the students are off the property or on the sidewalk or you know, not allowed to smoke on the school property. But yet, there's still a large number of students. I was in there one day, and I think there was probably 60 or 70 students who were smoking at a recess break or lunch break or what have you. And I couldn't believe that, you know, in the 21st century, that we could still have that many young people picking up the habit of cigarettes. And it seems to me that we're failing still in this regard. That we have educational institutions. We are given the responsibility of setting an example and trying to have a safe place for our students, but yet we don't seem to have been able to implement or write or come to some way to prevent students from smoking at school. Now, I was sitting in to law amendments a few moments ago on listening to the bill, what we refer to as the Mental Health Act, and it occurred to me that as I was thinking about coming in to speak to this bill and the question of students smoking, that it almost seems that we have to have a clause in a bill that says that you can't smoke within a mile of a school or some certain distance of a school, which would mean that it would be impossible for students to leave the grounds and have a cigarette. Now, just you know, the enforceability and trying to do this, whether that makes you know, I don't think it would break the school board's budget or the province's, but there definitely has to be more done to prevent young people from taking up cigarette smoking, because this is the draw for the industry. And if we could actually stop one generation from taking up the habit of cigarette smoke, we could stop smoking, period. We could end this blight on society. And it would seem that for all that we know and all that we can do, we can't stop that. We can't seem to step up to the plate and implement rules that would bring this to an end. Now, either we haven't really turned our minds to a possible solution for this, but it would seem to me that we're in the people business, and that our young people are the future, and if we're actually going to do the best thing for them, the best thing to alleviate the health costs associated with cigarettes, that it's going to take a much stronger action in terms of how we deal with prevention for young people taking up this habit, and that's still a large part that's not in this piece of legislation, Mr. Speaker. So with those comments, I'll take my seat and I'll move adjournment, Mr. Speaker.
Okay, our motion is to adjourn debate. Everyone, is it agreed? Recognize the Government House Leader.
Speaker, I move that the House do now rise to read again on the morrow at the hour of 2 p.m. and the House will sit from 2 until 6. The order of business following question period and daily routine will be public bills second reading and we'll be continuing on with Bill number 225, and then followed by 228 and 230.
Thank you. The motion is for the House to adjourn till 2 p.m. tomorrow. Is it agreed? It's agreed. All those in favour signify by saying aye. Contrary minded, nay. House is adjourned till 2 p.m. tomorrow.